by filing a copy of the township clerk's office and posting on the municipal bulletin board. Statement will be included in the minutes.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Rose?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Schwartz?
Here.
Vice Chair Stern?
Here.
Chair Bodnar?
Here.
Ms. Wilkerson? Ms. Orton? Ms. Belcher?
Here.
Mr. Began notified me that he won't be coming, and Mr. Thompson notified me that he won't be coming. Did you hear from Captain Group as well?
No, I think he told us last time he was actually on a vacation,
Okay.
unless he changed it.
All right, so Thompson, Began, and Congress we know about. And to Mrs. Zombie Gervin? Huh?
No.
All right, good and welfare, it's an opportunity from anybody from the public to speak to the board, address the board. You're allowed 3 minutes. If you hear about anything on tonight's agenda, there will be an opportunity for you to speak at that time. If you choose to speak now, you can. I can identify, raise your hand, Mr. Powers. When you want to speak, just state your name first and last and spell your last name.
Chuck Powers, Teaneck. Again, I want to thank the chair and the board secretary for having made available Mr. Price's report for the informal hearing that occurred on this same topic. I'm a little disappointed that at the formal hearing that document is not available to the public which is here, because as you can see, the public which is here far exceeds the number of people who were previously here. I want to say just a couple of things that are of significant concern, and I'm not sure whether or not they will appropriately come up later. This is the property at 1600 Teaneck Road. It actually has a piece of parkland on it, and that, so far as I can tell, is not actually recognized in this document. It actually creates an interesting additional component to the problem. And I'm going to be raising probably again, but let me make sure that you understand my major concern tonight. Of course, these properties are sufficiently derelict, and Mr. Price has properly talked about them as being detrimental to the general welfare of employees on the site and the overall community. And he talks about public health, safety, and general welfare, dealing with a whole range of issues. My question fundamentally is the process into which you are entering, one in which you will identify these two properties, publicly owned properties, as being in need of redevelopment. Is that the most expeditious way this township can address the dangers to the public, which are currently part of what occurred at 1600 River Road? Is it the quickest way to do that?
Sorry. Can I ask the members of the public now to talk if you want to? There's a large hallway outside to speak. These are recorded sessions that need to be then played, so any noise that's picked up is very difficult for those who have to listen to the tapes. Plus, respect to those who are speaking, it's just not respectful. Thank you.
As I'm sure we will later identify, this is not a meeting tonight about what future uses these two properties are to have by virtue of what you will act on tonight. I understand that. But there are a lot of folks who are very concerned that should you take this action, you will be on a path that will actually affect them, about which they believe they may not have been properly noticed. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Step forward, please.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Hall, that's H-A-L-L. I live at 87 Westervelt Place in Teaneck. And I'm here to ask this panel, as a resident of Westervelt Place, concerning the Teaneck Road 1475, that's on the corner of Teaneck Road and Westervelt. And I'm here on behalf of both people of Beverly and Westervelt to ask this panel to postpone this scheduled hearing and reschedule it for a later date when more residents can come. Not everyone on my block knew that this was going to happen. Actually, I couldn't find one person that knew about it. And they would like to speak out and be heard. We are current residents of the township of Teaneck. And our concerns and views should be valuable and should be heard. Many of the concerns are also regarding the traffic situation there. If you decide to rezone or change the use of this building without considering the traffic patterns that's already difficult, we are concerned that human lives will be in danger and be lost. So please consider us. We are current residents. You guys are supposed to be representing us. So I would ask you to reschedule this hearing for a later date when more residents can provide their valuable input. We have valuable things to say. I've lived there all of my life. There is no way that someone who never lived there has more experience and more input than I do. I come out of that street every single day of my life. So I do have something to contribute, and I feel a little disheartened that residents are not taken into account whatsoever. At least listen to us. That's my piece. I've said that, and I wanted that to be permanently in the record, that we are concerned and that other residents have asked for you to have a meeting at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Seeing no one else, the welfare is closed.
Yeah. Not a few comments also.
All right, I'm going to just quickly respond to that. So we're going to deal with this tonight, but just as a quick response to that, actually I'm going to hold my words, because I think in my introduction to tonight's hearing, I'll answer your comments, so I'm going to hold back on that.
I have several comments, if you don't mind, before the meeting starts. One, Mr. Abbott, I just wanted to point out you made an important comment online about the Planning Board and the Board of Adjustment minutes. All our minutes, as you know, are up to date and have been taken in, give or take a meeting or two for the umpteenth amount of years. They will be posted online. We spent the last few days talking about who will and how will. So I know you got your minutes, everything from an Oprah, but we're going to make sure that we post that online.
They are online.
They're online, even better. They told me to be by Monday, so I'm glad it was done already. Thank you very much, and we'll try to make sure that just like the other minutes are all caught up, that these minutes, Board of Adjustment and Planning Board, which have been relatively up to date for years, will be online for easy access as well going forward. If you don't see something, feel free to reach out. Just wanted, I'll wait for us. Would you prefer if I wait for everything else?
Yeah, but I have a prepared introduction for the hearing.
Thank you very much. I'll wait for the rest of it.
Okay. All right. So just before we get to that, just keep in line with that. You know that I've been very strict about this, and from the moment I became chair, the first thing I did was clean up the minutes, so we are up to date, including today's minutes from the last week. So we have April 11th minutes. Anybody have any corrections or comments about the minutes? Is there a motion then?
I'll move it, Mr. Chairman.
Move the minutes, Mr. Stern, and a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Rose. Comments? Roll call.
Mr. Rose?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Sawyer?
Yes.
Vice Chair Stern?
Yes.
Chair Bodnar?
Yes.
Ms. Organ?
Yes.
Ms. Bill?
She wasn't here. So 5 yeses and an abstention from Ms. Belcher. Okay. So those minutes are passed. And now we're going to move on to the hearing. Let's give a formal hearing on the area Need of Redevelopment, Block 1002, Lot 2, and Block 5703, Lot 11, in the Township of Teaneck. For the purpose of the tape, I just want to put on tonight's Tuesday, May 14th, Teaneck Planning Board meeting, May 14th, 2019. Tonight is a hearing for the Planning Board to determine whether to recommend the two DPW properties that I've just identified, whether to be designated as areas in need of redevelopment by the Township Council. We'll be hearing testimony from the Planning Board's planner, Mr. Richard Price. Following his testimony, there'll be questions by the board. Then there'll be questions and comments by the public. Following that, it'll be closed to the public, and then any additional questions, and then comments by the board, and then there'll be a vote from the board. I want to clarify to the members of the board and to the public what it means. Mr. Powers touched upon it, but I want to clarify it to be clear. What it means, an area in need of redevelopment, and this will additionally address comments by the member of the public who spoke earlier. This is clearly just a statement of this board, a recommendation to the council. If these two properties meet criteria of an area in need of redevelopment. It absolutely is no statement of what is to be built there. There's no discussion about that tonight. There'll be no questions from anybody here about that tonight. There'll be no comments about that tonight. The planner will not discuss that tonight. It's strictly, do these properties meet criteria of an area that needs redevelopment? I'll give you a very simple example that I used in discussion with various people about this. I have a car. I need to make a decision about my car. I'm getting a new car. Then you start talking about 17 different cars to get. Don't talk to me about a new car to get. I haven't decided if I'm getting a new car yet. When I decide if I'm getting a new car, then talk to me about the car. But first let me decide to get a new car. That's the same thing. The area of new development, then decide what you're going to do there. That's the next stage. First decide if you're getting a new car. Tonight is discussion or a hearing where our planners make a presentation. Do we need a new car? We got to make a recommendation to the town if they need a new car or not. That's what we decide. Is this an area of new development? The next step is what to do there. So in regard to the residents of that Westerville and the area around these properties, there are going to be many, many hearings and many, many meetings about this. And I believe that in Mr. Price's presentation, he will state how many times this is going to go back and forth between us, the council, multiple meetings, council, back to us before anything gets done and any step of the way. We absolutely do care about the residents. We absolutely do care about what the residents have to say. So does the council, and absolutely will hear tonight and every step of the way through this process what the residents have to say, and we'll take into consideration that. At this point, the attorney will swear in Mr. Price, and then he will come up. Mr. Price, please. At this point, I turn over the meeting to Mr. Price. This is Mr. Richard Price, our planner. He'll give his credentials. We'll swear him in as a witness. I ask that everybody be quiet throughout his entire presentation. The only people who can ask him questions during his presentation for clarification purposes is board members. If residents have any questions, hold on to them until it's open to the public. Thank you very much. Mr. Ortiz, please swear in the witness.
Mr. Rice, can you raise your right hand? Do you promise to testify truthfully and honestly before this board?
I do. For the record, my name is Richard M. Price, P-R-E-I-S-S, with the firm of Phillips Price, Gregor, Laney Hughes. We're planning and real estate consultants with offices in Hoboken, and we're also the township as well as the board's planning consultant. This is a formal hearing, so the first thing we just want to make sure on the record is that I would ask the attorney here to verify that a notice pursuant to the local redevelopment and housing law was provided for this hearing.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, all proper notice was given within the confines of the land use statute, giving jurisdiction to the board.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so I have some preliminary comments to talk a little bit about the process. I will try and address some of the comments that are made this evening up front, so that it's not something that's lingering until the end of the hearing. And then I will provide a very short presentation of the conclusions of our study. Essentially, as the chairman indicated correctly, the sole purpose of this hearing is for the planning board to make a determination whether to recommend that the 2 DPW properties meet the criteria under the local redevelopment and housing law to be designated as areas in need of redevelopment. And just so that everybody understands the redevelopment process, under the local redevelopment and housing law, it's broken into 2 parts. The first part is to make a determination whether the property should be designated as an area, sometimes also referred to as a redevelopment area. Once that is done, then the community can move on to part 2, which is to adopt a redevelopment plan. And in the redevelopment plan, the future of the 2 parcels in terms of their land use, their design, and all of the regulations pertaining to that would be set forth in the document. So I think the key, as the chairman has indicated this evening, is really this evening's focus is solely on the question of whether these 2 properties meet the criteria. Let me also just stress that there are many opportunities for the public to have input, not only in this part of the process, but in the second part of the process. So this process originated when the council adopted a resolution directing the planning board to undertake the investigation. A resolution was adopted. At that particular time, there was a map, there was an aerial, and there was a description of the 2 properties, and there was a description of the basis upon which the investigation should occur. The planning board then directed our firm to undertake the study. We did that, and although it's not legally required, back in April, we had a hearing in this very room at which I presented this plan. And even though it wasn't required, the chairman opened to public comment, and public comment was heard. And the purpose of that was just to provide the background, to provide a description, and to see whether the planning board required any changes to the report. And as a matter of fact, other than changing the cover and the date and the title page of the report, no changes have taken place. There were no comments or nothing that required changes. So if anybody has reviewed the draft, and whether they did it online or came to the office where it was available, the text, the maps, the content of the report is exactly the same. So obviously the public had an opportunity to provide comment that evening during the informal report, and tonight, as the chairman has indicated, after the board has had an opportunity to ask questions, again, it'll be open to the public, and the public can weigh in and provide their input on whether the board should recommend or not. If the board goes ahead and does that and recommends that designation, there will be another meeting at the council level, and the council will decide whether they will accept or not accept the planning board's recommendation. The planning board could say, we don't believe that it should be designated, or it believes that it should be designated, and the council can agree or disagree with any of those. And so there will be another opportunity for the public to weigh in and have comments at that period of time. Assuming that the council does designate the property as a redevelopment area, there's a required notification for the Department of Community Affairs. They have to determine that it was properly done, and then so that becomes the end of part 1. And then part 2, which is the adoption of a redevelopment plan, can occur. Now, it can happen in 2 ways. The council can decide that it wants to direct and have that redevelopment plan done under its own direction, or it can send it back to the planning board, like this process, and have the redevelopment plan put together under the direction of the planning board. When that redevelopment plan has been done and is ready to be presented, it gets adopted very much in the same way that zoning gets adopted. So the process is The council will then introduce it at a public meeting. No notice is required, similar when you amend zoning, it's introduced at the council. It then is sent to the planning board, similar to what's done with zoning, for a consistency review and recommendation. So at that particular hearing, again, it will be open to the public. Members of the public will be able to have input on the redevelopment plan. And then once it goes back to the council, there will be formal notice, and there will be a hearing on the redevelopment plan itself. And once again, it will be open to the public. The public will have an opportunity to provide comments on that. And then, to the extent that the redevelopment plan is adopted, similar to zoning, that's not the end of the process. Whoever it is that undertakes redevelopment pursuant to the redevelopment plan will have to come back before this board with notice and have to go through the site plan process. And it'll go through exactly the same process as is done in every other site plan. And they'll have to provide documents, they'll have to provide supporting studies, they'll have to bring witnesses, township consultants will provide reviews, agencies of the communities and boards will weigh in, and members of the public will have opportunity to ask questions and provide comment on that. So the process provides several opportunities, not just this evening, not just at the last meeting, to have input both on the designation itself and then on the redevelopment plan. So that is the process. Let me just address some of the questions that came up in the good and welfare portion. The first thing is a question is whether this is the most expeditious way to redevelop the property. As I said at the meeting in April, there are two major advantages for undertaking a development through this process, redevelopment process. The first is, and it doesn't matter who actually gets to redevelop it, whether it's the township itself redevelops the property, or whether it brings in a redeveloper to do it. If a property is designated as an area in need of redevelopment, there's a host of funding sources that are available to assist in the redevelopment, including things like the ability to clean up the property. It also is, if there is a competition for funding, properties which are designated as areas in need of redevelopment actually score higher points, so there's more likelihood that they will be funded. And the second major advantage is that if it is designated, and it turns out that the redevelopment is undertaken by a redeveloper other than the community, and in most likelihood, even if it were to be the redevelopment of the DPW on site, which is one of the possibilities, whoever does that redevelopment, instead of doing it as a bidding process where essentially the township in an open bidding process is more or less bound to choose the highest bidder, if the area is designated for redevelopment, other criteria can be utilized to pick that redeveloper. So the most appropriate use, the developer who has the most financial wherewithal to undertake it, the best plan, the most attractive plan, one which addresses the impacts of the community. So in this situation, if the redevelopment is undertaken by a redeveloper, there will be the ability of Teaneck to open it up to the public and then be able to evaluate and choose the most appropriate developer. So there definitely are advantages. So in the long run, is this the most expeditious in terms of time? No, but in circumstances like this, if you're looking to redevelop a property, Mr. Powers is right. It's one of the DPW properties, the one on 1600 River Road, is filled with enormous challenges, and so the person who makes the highest bid may not be the person who most expeditiously can clean up that site and redevelop it. So when the council approached our office, we've done redevelopment all over the state, we said we agree that this is the best way to undertake it, the most advantageous to the community. Let me just address the other questions that came up, concerns of the residents. So we understand that there's great concern of the residents in regard to both properties, in addition to 1600 River Road to 1425 River Road. There are many steps in the process. When the redevelopment plan is considered, traffic, parking, and all of the concerns that were raised are going to be evaluated, and the use and the redevelopment plan will have to take that into consideration. Moreover, whoever it is that redevelops the property, when they come back to this board, they will have to do a traffic study, they will have to do a parking study to address those issues. And I might just say one other thing, because I'm not sure everybody in the community understands this, but our office is conducting an impact study of the State Street area, which includes the 1425 Teaneck Road. And one of the things that we're looking at is the cumulative impacts of all the prospective development in that area from a traffic and a parking point of view. So that is being undertaken. It's not part of this process, but the township certainly has recognized that is a legitimate issue and that has to be addressed. So separate and apart from the redevelopment process, the traffic patterns in that area, and specifically as it relates to 1425, will be looked at. The township's traffic consultant, Stonefield Engineering, provided a scope of work, which has been, and a budget which has been approved, and they're currently undertaking that study. That study will be presented in a different forum, but it does indicate that the township is seeking answers and wants to provide to that segment of the community the most up-to-date information regarding traffic which will be generated and how the community is going to deal with congestion, pedestrian traffic, and how people are going to be able to get in and out of the side street once the redevelopment occurs. Okay, let me go on to the study itself. I'm not going to take very long because this study in draft form has been out for a while. I did do a presentation at the prior meeting, but I'll just go through it quickly. Just to put it on the record, the two properties are Block 1002, Lot 2, owned by the township, known and referred to as 1600 River Road, 7.58 acres, and this is where the DPW facility is located. And Block 5703, Lot 11, also owned by the township, also known as 1425 Teaneck Road, 0.32 acres, and that's where the maintenance shop of the DPW is located. Just very briefly in terms of the master plan and the zoning, 1600 River Road has been the focus of numerous studies over the years, going back to the 1960s, and most recently in 2017, the planning board adopted a master plan re-examination, and there was no conclusive recommendation in the 2017 master plan. It said that studies were ongoing and should continue to determine whether the property should be reused as a DPW or perhaps something else. In terms of the 1425 River Road, the 2017 master plan recommended that the property be rezoned to allow a senior development and possibly some ground floor retail development. And then the property was rezoned in July 2017 by the Township Council. And so that property currently, even though it's now utilized as a DPW maintenance facility, actually would allow for the redevelopment of, we think around, the capacity would be around 20 senior apartment units. In terms of the criteria that are have been established under the local redevelopment and housing law, I'm referring to the statute by its legal reference, which is NJSA 40A:12A-5, and in that section of the statute, it says, here are the 8 criteria which whoever's doing the investigation can take a look at, and if any one of these, if the property meets any one of these criteria, then it can be designated as an area in need of redevelopment. In this particular case, the focus has been on two criteria, criteria A and criteria D, and both properties in the investigation we have concluded meet both of those criteria. But just for the record, let me read what those are. Criteria A is as follows. The generality of buildings are substandard, unsafe, unsanitary, dilapidated, or obsolescent, or possess any such characteristics, or are so lacking in light, air, or space as to be conducive to unwholesome living or working conditions. And criteria D is as follows. Areas with buildings or improvement which by reason of dilapidation, obsolescence, overcrowding, faulty arrangement or design, lack of ventilation, light, and sanitary facilities, excessive land coverage, deleterious land use or obsolete layout, or any combination of these or other factors are detrimental to the safety, health, morals, or welfare of the community. So very briefly, 1600 River Road, we conducted the study. I described it once before. We did interviews with the township staff. We have visited the property on several occasions. We did so again recently to make a determination of what the conditions were there. And the study concludes that both of those criteria that I just read into the record do apply to the property. Very briefly, the overall conditions on the property include deteriorating and ill-maintained structures in substandard and potentially unsafe condition, which is a detriment to public health and safety. The buildings are in poor shape. There's a large number of trucks and equipment which have to be repaired on site. Some of the built outdoors. In 2018, a wall in the main garage building was determined to be structurally unsound and had to go on emergency repairs. And then there's scattered outbuildings which are also in very poor conditions. The property suffers from faulty and obsolescent layout that's not conducive to efficient operation of the DPW. And we've noted that there are substantial environmental constraints on the site, particularly flooding. Several of buildings are located in the Hackensack River floodway. There's also environmental contamination issues. And so the combination of those factors, we believe, do indicate that the site does meet criteria A and D. With regard to the DPW maintenance facility at 1425, our review of the building showed that it's in a substandard and dilapidated condition. It hasn't been significantly renovated or maintained since it was used as a recreation center in the past. The building is over 50 years old. It's dilapidated. The interior is substandard. It was never really adapted to suit the present use. And it is overcrowded, and there are what we believe hazardous working conditions within the building. So on that basis, we also concluded that 1425 met criteria A and criteria D. So that is the end of my report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Howard Rose.
Thank you for the information. I've heard this information several times, and I appreciate what I think is truly a need for rehabilitation, redevelopment of an area. But I want to make sure that I understand and the public understand some of the back and forth that you had indicated in this being just the preliminary step of a preliminary stage. We are taking testimony from you and information from you. We are going to have information to consider from you and either accept or ignore. We're going to have information and concerns voiced by the public to consider, accept, and or ignore. This information then goes back to council as to whether we make or do not make a recommendation to go forward, to not go forward, to whatever, which may by council be considered, accepted, or ignored. So I want to make sure that people understand there's a lot of accepted, considered, and ignored in my statements, and I want to make sure that that's a true perception of what can and may go on. I realize that we're only talking about step one, and I know a lot of people do associate quote-unquote step two with step one. Obviously, no step one, there's never a step two. So that's what leads maybe perhaps to a lot of the concerns that are being made. When it comes to the terminology redevelopment, you are indicating, I believe, that redevelopment implies that what is shouldn't be. And with that consideration, what should be may be either a redevelopment to rehabilitate, to make good a situation that's difficult or dangerous or whatever.
Excuse me, Howard. Right now, there's questions for him, if you have a question, because we're going to get the public comment. I'm saying our comments are at the end.
Okay.
Well, I close it, because we want to hear what everyone has to say before we make our comments, so.
Okay, so my question comes down to basically, just to reiterate what is, what isn't, what can, what won't possibly happen regarding this. And also just another slight formal statement. Above your head, just to formally state, it looks like that lighting fixture is somewhat dislodged. It may be safe, it may not. I would suggest that we officially ask that that be reviewed and evaluated before it falls down.
Richard, you finished your presentation.
Yes, I am.
It doesn't matter.
Right, it's fine, it's fine.
Oh, it's on Mr. Price.
There's other people in his office.
No one wants to talk anymore. So.
All right. Mr. Schwartz, you have a question?
Does this play into the fact that we've rezoned Teaneck Road already as low-income housing about a year ago? Is that correct? Does that mean anything right now, or as opposed to River Road, which is still zoned as town-owned, commercial? I don't know what that formal.
It may influence, what the redevelopment plan comes out with. The redevelopment, one of the things that I didn't mention this is when a redevelopment plan is adopted, it typically supersedes the underlying zoning. So it's possible that when we come to 1425 Teaneck Road, that somebody might have another idea of how it could be redeveloped, which is not a senior housing.
Understood.
Raise the mic, please.
Understood, I appreciate it.
So it's possible that the redevelopment plan will allow for something else, or it may allow for that and other things. So it plays into, consideration of whether the underlying zoning would influence or be retained as one of the uses to which it could be put. But it doesn't happen.
Understood. If you could just, for the benefit of some comments made about the notification to neighbors, when we redid the rezoning as low-income housing on Teaneck Rd, how many meetings did we have so far? Was that 5 or 6?
Well, there were a number of meetings, and what happened is it was part of a re-examination of a master plan. Mm-hmm. So I think there was a discussion about that. There was a formal presentation that was adopted, and then when the rezoning occurred, it was introduced. It came back to the planning board for consistency review and was finally adopted. So that rezoning was probably the subject of 4 meetings at which the pilot was advised.
I'll speak with the resident afterwards. Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question. Mr. Price,
I'm sorry. There are 8 criteria
Yes.
that the state has codified to that any of which can necessitate a designation of an area in need of redevelopment.
Correct.
On average, you've done a number of redevelopments throughout the state. I mean, on average, is it fair to say that maybe most properties have only fallen into one of those?
Yeah, so the answer is yes. Sometimes property only meets one of the criteria. Sometimes it's none. Sometimes it's a number. There's also, I should add, it's not really relevant here, but there's also situations in which you're looking at a larger area which consists of a number of properties. And if the majority of the properties can be designated, but some individually cannot, there's what's known as Section 3 of the redevelopment law that says if the redevelopment of those properties which don't meet the designation are integral and necessary to the redevelopment, they can be included in the redevelopment area. So we're not doing that here,
Right.
but
So
there are
property.
circumstances even where property that in and of itself is not, doesn't meet the designation, which could be included if it's necessary to facilitate that overall
Right.
redevelopment.
Got that, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your presentation.
You're
It's very
welcome.
informative. You mentioned that there is Stonefield Engineering
Yes.
that is undertaking impact studies as
Traffic. We're doing an impact. We're looking at a number of things, but they're specifically looking at traffic.
Okay, so how far are they in terms of being able to produce a report?
They were only authorized, I believe, about a week or so ago to undertake the study. So we think it's probably going to take about a month before that study is ready, and then it'll be rolled out to the public.
So it sounds like your firm has done a lot of redevelopment throughout the state. So isn't
Correct.
an impact study kind of vital to making informed decisions about redevelopment, would you say?
So I will say this, is that impact study is not just looking at one property. We're looking at six properties which either have been constructed, have been approved, or under construction, or may be approved. So the State Street area seems to have attracted a number of proposals for development. And even though those which have been approved, some which were rezoned, some went to the zoning board, traffic was a consideration, land use impacts were a consideration individually. That particular area wasn't looked at in terms of the overall impacts. And so we had a community meeting earlier this year. Residents came out and said, we're concerned about what the impacts would be. And so the township has directed our office, and we're working with Stonefield to do a comprehensive impact study of that whole area, to look at those developments and see what impacts it would have on that area. And there are 10 factors, one of which is traffic and parking. So I just was responding that aside from traffic and parking being something that was looked at when 1425 was rezoned, something which obviously will be looked at again if it's part of a redevelopment plan. The community also recognizes that Teaneck Road and State Street and the number of intersections in the area could be impacted by all of this development. So we're undertaking a wider impact study that looks at the cumulative impact of all the traffic that we generated by all of those projects. And in any redevelopment plan, it's like a rezoning. You have to look at, if you're determining are the uses are appropriate, what are the land use impacts? What should the design be? How does it conform to the character of the community? How much traffic would be generated? Can the local roads accommodate that? Can the water and sewer be provided? How many parking spaces should be provided? So all of those things
Are valuable.
are considered. Yeah, this is not just where you throw out a few ideas and say, whoever wants to build something, they can go ahead and do
Because
it.
what you just said, based upon the impact study, that may kind of determine whether or not the development of 20 senior apartment units is really where we should be going. That, in other words, that the results of a study may impact the type of zoning or the type of development that should ultimately go there. And the question is,
I want to stop there because we discussed over it. We don't want to talk about what's going there. So.
Right, I'm just asking from a study perspective.
But
you mentioned that.
But that's why they're doing the study to determine what can and should not go there. But tonight we don't want to talk about that. I don't want to start it here because I don't want to get it going there. So
All I'll indicate
respectfully, I need to.
Yeah, all I'll indicate is when the redevelopment is studied, that one of those factors that is into in all situations.
And I appreciate that, and all I'm saying is that I think that impacts a discussion about development, is understanding what the possibilities are.
That's the purpose of the study.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't have any questions. I heard you last time and you did a great job, and I asked my questions then, so you did a great job again today. So why don't you sit down, you'll come up if you need to. All right, so I just want to be clear again to give the parameters now for the public input at this point. You have the opportunity now both to ask questions about his presentation, make comments about his presentation, strictly about areas in need of redevelopment. Not about what you think should be built there, not about what you think shouldn't be built there. Just if you have a question about his presentation or about a comment about his presentation. Strictly about, do you think it should not be an area designated redevelopment, or it should be? Or again, if you didn't understand something regarding his presentation, or if you have a question, just like the board members here who ask questions. Or if you want to tell him he did a great job, whatever, he'd love to hear that too. I'm going to have my timer on for 3 minutes. As some of the regulars who've been here know that I'm very conscious about letting the public speak and try not to limit the public. The purpose of the timer here is to give everybody here the opportunity to speak. So, the way it works here in my court is everybody gets 3 minutes till everybody in the room has 3 minutes, and then I'll give everybody a second chance if they need it. So I just want everybody to have the opportunity to speak. So if you speak in 3 minutes and you're not done, after everybody in the room gets 3 minutes who wants to speak, and you still have more to speak, you'll get a second chance at it. And I'll keep giving you a bite at the apple until you're done, and then I'll close it to the public. So I'd like to start with anybody who has not yet spoken. If you've spoken good or welfare already, let's give somebody else from the public the opportunity to speak first. Go ahead.
Can I speak from here?
No, you gotta come up to the mic so we can hear you, get you on the record.
Okay.
I need you to state your first and last name and spell your last name, please. Do it slowly because we have a...
My name is Anna Kurtz, K-U-R-Z.
Okay, we're gonna have our attorney swear all the witnesses to swear or affirm every one of our witnesses, please.
What?
Raise your right hand.
It's an official hearing, so everyone has to be sworn in.
Raise your right hand. State your name for the record.
Again?
Yes, please.
Anna Kurtz.
Do you swear and affirm that
I
you
will
tell
lie.
the truth to the board?
I will lie. I have a question. What is the
Very loud, please.
What is the alternative to development? What if you have these conditions and you do not redevelop? Can I sit down or should I listen to the answer?
Well, first of all, they don't have to do anything with it. The question is, it's just designating it as an area of redevelopment. They can designate the area and then do nothing with it also.
But
Mr. Price?
So,
Lift the microphone.
if the council ultimately does not designate it as an area in need of redevelopment, then they would not be able to utilize the powers or the opportunity to do a redevelopment plan. The existing zoning for that property would remain in place. And that, whether those properties would be redeveloped or rehabilitated or changed in any way would then be, determined by whoever owns that property, which would be the township.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening.
Well, just state your name and spell your last name first.
Teresa Jones, Jones.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth, and the word?
Yes, I do. I just have a short question. I was concerned about
Pull the mic down, Rob.
I was concerned about the zoning. Like you said, the property at 1425 Teaneck Road is zoned for what type of business or establishment now?
The zoning would be about what would be built there in the future. That's not what we're talking about tonight.
But doesn't it have to be zoned for something to have residential?
1425 is zoned to allow retail on the ground floor and residential above, or residential on 3 stories, and we've made a determination approximately 20 senior units could be developed on that property. That's the zoning there.
Next. I got hands all over the place. Can I, hold on a second. Again, I'll ask the public, please keep it down. I'll go out in the hallway, thank you. I'm sorry, Liz.
Lillian Lewis, Lewis.
Please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth to the board.
I affirm. Yes, I have a question. First, with what Mr. Price said about the redevelopment. With the redevelopment, and the young lady asked about what's the alternative. So he said you can develop, if you redevelop it, it can be also a quiet space. Is that correct? For redevelopment, that's a choice or an option.
Meaning to just leave it empty land?
As what do you call that space?
Open space.
Open space.
Open space.
So that's an alternative. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Secondly, Councilman Schwartz, when he was talking at the council meeting, he did state 40 to 45 units, and you were saying 20 units if it's age restricted. So which way are you going with that? So I guess you'll make your mind later on that.
Again, that would be at the later level,
Yes,
so if you could just
But
wait.
one thing Councilman Schwartz mentioned here tonight, he said that Teaneck Rd has been rezoned for low-income housing. Is that correct? I didn't know anything about that.
I believe it's affordable income housing. I'll speak to he rezoned it, so I'll ask him.
Yes.
You talking the entire Teaneck Road or just that particular house?
That site.
Oh, you said Teaneck Road, and I
Or
know.
Teaneck Road as in tonight's
Oh,
Teaneck
okay.
Road. Sorry.
I know 1500 is
No,
definitely
no,
not.
no. Tonight's Teaneck Road address.
Any hands for people still who haven't spoken yet tonight, ma'am? Try to see you, I'm just trying to get to the face first.
My name is Diane Mateo.
Spell the last name.
T-E-A-L.
T-E.
Like the color.
T-E-A-L.
And what was the first one?
Diane.
Daima.
Spell it.
D. But you can, D-A-A-I-M-A-H. Last name is Teal, like the color.
Please raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth to the board.
Yes. So I've lived in Teaneck for, my family lived in Teaneck for over 45 years now, and I actually went to the rec center, which is I think 1425. And I've seen that center just beat down, passing it so many years. Nothing has been done with it, and as far as the redevelopment, I do think that something should happen, whether it's the rehabilitation to make it pleasant for the community. Mark Schwartz, what's the name? You said that, I didn't get the clarification. Is it rezoned or rezoned as in that area low income?
That site, I don't know the clarification, I used the word Teaneck Road. That site that we're discussing tonight, 1425 Teaneck Road, was rezoned last year or the year before, I apologize which year, as in a low-income affordable housing zone. Is that, please clarify me.
Restricted to seniors.
Senior citizens.
Low and moderate income senior.
Low and moderate income senior restricted this particular piece of property.
Okay.
And if I may clarify, one of the reasons why we did this was because there's a lot of development going on in town that people says, we need a low-income housing, we need senior housing. The problem is, we're not the developers, we can't control that. They have to pay millions for the land, they have to make, they can't afford to build low-income housing. This particular site, and the reason why the council unanimously chose to rezone it was because we own it, we can control the destiny of the site, and we can, after listening to the community speak in the past, say that age group in that income bracket wants something, we have the financial ability, because we own it, to then rezone it as such. That was the intentions, the only intentions of the council, is to make this one particular property to be of that low income. Now there was a property next door which we may have rezoned as well, that East Restaurant. There was talks that maybe we can include into one big site. Nothing's gone on with the acquisition of that property. We've had no communication forever with that landlord. But the intentions were to give this site to the seniors, to the the moderate and restricted income seniors, because that's within our control. We have been speaking to nonprofits nonprofit developers. The same nonprofit developer that developed 60 Bergen Avenue has expressed interest in a 40, she's expressed interest in a 40 or 60 unit facility for
seniors?
For seniors, nonprofit. There were commercial, satisfied the commercial on the first floor. There were talks in the neighborhood has always expressed interest in past developments that there should be retail on the first floor. There was rezoned as retail, but the nonprofit and some members of the council has says, can that be a satellite senior center where for the seniors that can't make the trip to the Rhoda Center, they can have a drop-in center right over there on Teaneck Rd. Again, because we control the site, that's something we can say, there's plenty of retail on Teaneck Rd. Let's keep this retail as a first floor or second floor senior center. Something to be talked about as we go into the future, what the neighborhood prefers, senior center on the first floor or retail. But that was what the whole council envisioned as it relates to this site of 1425 Teaneck Rd.
Okay, and so one of the other residents did mention something as far as traffic. So if there is retail or even a senior center, the traffic and just the congestion.
Stop. We can't talk about this. Stop it. I let you go far enough. We're not going to talk about future stuff there. They're doing a traffic study, you heard. We're not talking about what's going to be there retailing.
Right.
Anything else?
I know, but several people have mentioned.
We're not talking about future stuff. I let you go further than you should have gone.
Okay. First of all, one person at a time.
Right.
We don't have to listen to the city.
Right. Anything else? Time.
No, that's it.
Used up a lot of her time.
I wanted to talk about the good welfare.
Name is Nakama Pollock, P-O-L-A-K.
Just raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth to the board.
Yes.
What was your first name?
Nakama.
Spell it.
M-E-C-H-A, M as in Mary A. In regards to 1600 River Road,
Closer to the mic, please.
Mr. Price mentioned something about environmental issues, contamination issues. Can we get any further clarification as to that? And lastly, what is the current zoning of 1600 River Road?
Can you repeat that louder, the last sentence, please?
What is the current zoning at 1600 River Road?
So first of all, the current zoning, it's in the P district, which is public land district. So meaning be utilized for municipal or public purpose. And the site is contaminated. There was previous lead contamination that has been cleaned up, but there are ongoing studies regarding its contamination. And obviously, if the property were to be redeveloped, one of the requirements under New Jersey law is it would have to be cleaned up. It has to be cleaned up to a certain standard if it's used for non-residential purposes. If for some reasons it's utilized for residential purposes, there's a higher standard that it would have to be cleaned.
You certainly wouldn't get away with the phase one over there, I bet.
Correct. So that is one of the impediments. Is detailed studies wouldn't be undertaken until the property was redeveloped, and then there's no way that the property could be reutilized and redeveloped without the state weighing in and making sure that that contamination was properly cleaned up.
Tanya Turner, I'm a resident of Teaneck for over 28 years.
Please raise your right hand. I swear to tell the truth to the board.
Affirm. So I guess I just have a question about clarification of the letter that was sent from Dario.
Come up to the mic just a little more.
Sure. Dario, Albert, Metz, Ironman, Kanda, Kankana, Ortiz, and Kraus. In the latter part of the letter, it says, "You're being sent this notice as property you own may be affected." I actually contacted the lawyers and I wanted to understand how the property at 27 Beveridge Street, which is the next block south of Westerveld Street,
is affected. We're 3 houses in after East Restaurant. I wasn't clear on that. The second part of my question is...
Let's answer that quickly. So basically, the requirement is all properties within 200 feet of the property line. So you're within 200 feet of the property line, that's what it means by may be affected.
Okay. The second part of my question is, what is the framework for criteria as considered accepted, ignored, or considered? Like, what is the framework around that? What is number of people? Is it a vote? What is that? What's the criteria for that vote going through?
Mr. Roseman.
That's his terminology. It's nothing to do with our board or anything.
Okay, I'd still like an answer to that.
I don't know, ask him.
Okay.
Pose it louder though, so I can answer. I'm interested in what you're saying.
All right, so I want to understand what the framework you mentioned about being for a criteria for being considered, being accepted, or ignored by the public for redevelopment.
Yes. This is a discussion type of situation in a sense. We get a review, Mr. Price, we get information, we listen, we consider. Same thing with the public. You have an opportunity to give us your opinion, your concern, your questions. Hopefully they get answered, and to your satisfaction, hopefully as well. But be that as it may, when it all comes down to is at the end of the process, a decision's made. You may have an impact on what's being discussed, you may not have an impact on what's being discussed. We may make a decision that goes in one direction or goes in another direction. This is a very fluid situation. At a certain point in time, we're going to issue a statement. Yes, we agree with, no, we don't agree with, whatever. And it just, what I'm indicating is, we don't know what's going on. And the more input we get, I guess, the more we have to consider. But the more we consider, hopefully it impacts the decision we make. Will it or won't it? Time will tell. So yes, it's important to get as many people who have a concern or an opinion that they want heard in here, but that's not to say that the resolve will be based on that only or go in the direction that you're hoping it will go. All I'm saying is understand the fact that it's an open situation right now.
Thank you.
I'd like to comment slightly different to that question. I believe that everything that I hear from everybody, I consider, and all of the comments have an impact on my decisions. Often when applicants come before us and I hear testimony from 2 sides, I make a statement all the time. We're going to make a decision here. Now, obviously, I'm hearing from 2 different sides. I don't want anybody to think just because I have to vote one way doesn't mean that I didn't listen to the other side. I listened to both sides. I consider both sides. It impacts on my decision, but I have to vote one way. So I listen to everybody. I consider everything. It all impacts on my decision. So that's how I feel about it.
Thank you.
Anybody else who hasn't been heard? Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Chuck Merrow, M-E-R-R-O-W.
Please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth before.
Yes. I know it's kind of hard to put this into a time frame, but is there any way you could put a time frame around all this we're discussing? Because my house borders 1425 Teaneck Road, and I guess part 2 of my question would be, who's going to maintain that property throughout this whole thing? This sounds to me like it could take years.
Well, first of all, Mr. Melfish should answer, but it's a township property and the township is required to maintain it.
Well, they don't maintain it.
So, bring that up to the township.
The grass is this high, the wall's tipping over into my driveway. Just curious, because this has been going on for a long time. I'll have to come down to town and ask them to pick up the grass.
Mr. Melfish, you want to give the township a violation?
So when you come in the office, go up to the engineer.
You want to address that with the DPW?
If it's town property, it usually goes straight to engineering or DPW.
Well, I discussed that with the workers there, and they just tell me to come down here, because they say nothing can be done unless I do that, which I have in the past. But if this construction or reassessment process takes a long time, which I would guarantee it will.
It will.
Who's
Can I
who's gonna maintain that property?
Can I make a
throughout?
suggestion to you?
Yes.
Honestly, I would suggest that you send an email to the township manager. All right, say you're here tonight and bring it to his attention that you hear and understand that this is gonna be a long process, that you live there, and these are your concerns, and other neighbors here, maybe a few of you write. I mean, the email is on the website.
Sure.
And I think he will be responsive to it. Okay?
What is your address, sir?
16 Westerville Place.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I just, I already emailed the township manager just now your complaints. So if you want to just email me your information, I'll tie you into the string. I've already emailed him a minute ago, asking about the grass and the wall that's tipping and the walls in disrepair.
Great, appreciate it, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else who hasn't heard yet? Because I think Mr. Power's arm is going to fall off if it hanging together.
Okay, perfect.
No, Mr. Power's going.
No, go ahead.
You sure?
Sure.
These guys?
He's a perfect gentleman.
Right.
Hello. How does this work?
State your name. Frank, talk good. You know you talk loud enough, you don't need to.
Erica Miller.
Hands up.
That name will be sworn. I don't even have to spell it. Now we can.
Please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth to the board.
Yes. Hi.
Hi, Eric.
I just want to say, when we think about a car, let's think about the driving vehicle of Teaneck's economy.
Move that mic.
Can you hear me? Yes. All right. I just think that, you know, a senior citizen home is not going to help us in the demand of all these people that's moving into Teaneck. You know, I feel like we need, you know, supermarkets, food, you know, fish markets. 1425 on State Street, if you drive from the highway, the turnpike, or Route 80 or 4, you're driving down Teaneck Road, you don't have like any type of market until you get into Bergenfield. I feel like since it's going to be a demand of all those people, we should create, you know, some type of company within in Teaneck that can, you know, with that, we can, let me say it like this. We have a demand. We have a lot of new residents that's moving in the area because of new developments. We need to make an economy from that demand. A fruit market or something like that in the community could be a way that people could get jobs and people can eat good, and it will help with this demand of new people in the community. All right. That's all I have to say.
Am I allowed to reply to that?
Oh, no, we weren't supposed to be talking about it. What's going on? I let her cheat. Mr. Powers, let's go.
I'm sorry, you said when you think about a car, you don't know what type of car to get or if you should get a car, right? That's what you said?
No, I said, let's not talk about what car we're getting.
Right.
Tonight we're deciding if we need a new car.
Right, if we need a new car. So if we do need a new car, what type of vehicle do we need?
No, let's not talk about what type of car we need. That's the point. Do you need a new car? Do you need a new car?
We need a new car.
Do you need a car, yes or no? That's the question tonight. Next time we're going to talk about what car.
So my 3 minutes. What I'm going to say is, let's think about the car that we need if we needed a car.
No, that's not tonight's meeting. Tonight's meeting. No, stop.
Hold it. I want somebody to come listen to this CD. It's not going to be me.
Okay.
One person at a time.
Okay, I'll stop what I'm saying, but all I know is we need something that will drive our economy. So let's get the right type of business on State Street.
The next meeting.
Okay.
The next appropriate meeting for that. Chuck.
Thank you, Chuck Powers. Teaneck. P-O-W-E-R-S. Don't turn that 3 minutes on. Full truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God.
30 seconds.
Sure. I have actually a procedural question.
By the way, I'm very proud of you.
If in fact, the planner, it turns out to be like the,
Please be quiet in the audience. If you feel you have to talk, go outside.
And decides to use up all my time with his answer. What's the relationship between questions and comments? Is there a distinction? 3 minutes for comments?
You got 3 minutes, that's it.
And I get to talk again?
You're down to 239. 35.
Is there some reason why you did not include the fact that there's parkland on the 1600 River Road facility?
We are aware of the fact that the Hackensack River walkway has been designated on a part of the property. It doesn't have anything to do with whether the property qualifies as an area in need of redevelopment or not. That will be taken into consideration in the redevelopment.
And it is in fact on the official glossy that the town has put out in 2011 and 15. I have another question, that is, where are we with the environmental examination? In 2016, in December 2016, Mr. Price, you were asked to actually carry out an engineering and environmental study, and yet it is not until December, it looks to me, as if a contract was actually let to have anything to do with the assessment of this property. Can you explain why we are so late in getting to having any conception of what the real problem is? A preliminary assessment, which was going to cost $5,000, will certainly not tell us what we need to know about the remediation activity to be required, and to consider how it is that it affects both criteria A and B.
So
Stop your timer.
So there was a recommendation back then for me to discuss with the Environmental Commission, Mr. Hoffman, with Dr. Hoffman in particular, whether an environmental study should be undertaken of 1600 River Road. I had a conversation with him, and I don't know what occurred afterwards. That study is not relevant to this part of the analysis. We know that the property is contaminated. We don't know the extent of the contamination. It is a factor in terms of whether the site meets criteria A and criteria D. And as I've said before, if a redevelopment plan goes forward, then environmental cleanup is going to be necessary. Whether the town undertakes the study now or later, or whoever is the redeveloper undertakes that study, that can be done at that time. It's not necessary for this part of the process to have those answers.
In the resolution that is going to be suggested and recommended tonight by you, Mr. Price, is the entire report that we've seen here included in that recommendation, or is there only some portion of it that is the resolution that will actually become before this board?
My assumption is that this study will be used as a basis for making that determination. Other than that, it doesn't have any relevance in terms of the redevelopment plan itself. All it does is it is intended to meet the requirements of an area need of redevelopment investigation.
My reason for asking that question, I'm going to the commentary now. My reason for asking that question is because there are substantial portions of this report which actually do in fact address issues of future use. And it seems to me those should not have been part of something that's actually deemed to be part of this particular, on the basis of actually your definition.
30 seconds.
One last thing. I do hope this board thinks through what Mr.
Sorry, would you stop for a second? I have to step up to this, open the door, and on the quorum, so can you stop for 1 second, please? Sorry.
27 seconds?
20.
How can that be?
But then you get to go again.
Sorry about that, we'll see.
The door was locked, sorry.
Fight for me, Karen, will you?
Good.
Mr. Price's response to my question about whether or not this is the most expeditious way to handle this was exactly right on. It is by far the least expeditious way to get this township to address the things that make this a derelict property. It is fundamental that the town not continue to put at risk its employees and the public.
Finish your sentence.
Can I come back?
Go ahead. Finish your sentence. That was the end of the sentence, no? Not their employees at risk.
If in fact we're putting employees at risk and thereby incurring substantial liability by undertaking only now this long-term process that you heard described tonight, you will, in fact, have ignored the fact that since 1999,
I gave it extra times and I said, you can come back later.
Mr. Chair, am I allowed to make a comment on that comment? Directly related to the redevelopment. I just want, for the record, Mr. Powers, I appreciate your comments. This isn't going to be a quick process. I understand the desire for a new DPW. The new DPW, if that's what we build at River Road, will be a $10 million expenditure. We will not do this redevelopment, this rezoning, if there is any rezoning or redevelopment, in a quote quick or quote expeditious factor. I understand your concern for the employees that work there, but we've always been accused in the past of rushing and doing things quickly, and as I explained, there's been meetings and meetings. This will be a slow process. Back in napkin math says if this was even redeveloped as anything, it would be at least 5 or 6 years down the line. So I appreciate your patience, but we will do it slowly and we will not do it expeditiously.
State your name.
Cheryl Hall, Hall, 87 Westerville Place, Teaneck.
Please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth before it.
I do. I just wanted to clarify because I've heard.
Address the board.
Oh yes, I just wanted to clarify because I've heard different things actually from the board, from Mr. Price, and everyone else. Is it 1475 or 1425? 25. It's 25. Okay, because I've heard the different numbers even here tonight. Okay. I just had a question, and again, my question and my input and my concern is not to cause problems or block anything. It's just because this situation is where I live and it impacts me and whether or not I want to continue to struggle and stay in Teaneck, or if my property values are going to go up and down. I'm very concerned. So I had a question just about what, and it's really for Mr. Price, about the criteria that went into this study. Like, how did you arrive at it? Did you look at, I don't know, accident reports? Did you take a drive by the property? How do you come up with these types of conclusions? And this is just to help me understand the process better. Because we can write a letter and say our recommendation is this, but how did you formulate that?
The criteria don't relate to traffic. It relates to the conditions of the property itself. Traffic is not a consideration in terms of the designation itself. Traffic will be a consideration when we do the redevelopment plan and the township decides what the property is going to be redeveloped for. We'll look at things like where the access drive would be provided, if one is, how much parking should be provided, pedestrian safety, whether traffic can continue to make left and right-hand turns in and out of Westerville. All of those things will be taken into consideration.
Thank you. That was very informative. Thank you.
Good. Anybody else? Mr. Powers again. Then.
I want to briefly elaborate on my concern about actually figuring out some process whereby this town takes responsibility for the way in which it has managed this property. There's the 1965 letters that went, the year of the 1967 letter, in which it was clear that everybody knew that something had to be done about this. In 1999, we set aside $4 million to start the cleanup process. We didn't do anything with it. We built a salt tent, and then in 2012 we decided we were just going to abandon the entire thing, and we left $3,700,000 on the table. We took it back. We took it off. We appropriated the money that we had set forth in a capital program. We have continued to do that. Even in 2018, we started out with a $3 million number for this project, and we cut it back to $50,000 before the council went forward with it. Expeditiousness in a situation in which a report has clearly made it clear that there is substantial liability for either the workers or the public who get injured in that situation, may in fact wipe out much of the consideration that we're having to do with now. I'm not sure that what you're going to get from the EDA can possibly be a counterbalance to that risk, in my judgment. Thank you.
Can I just make a limit?
Yeah, please.
Let me be very clear. Our study didn't indicate that there's any liability whatsoever. It was just referencing that section of the report that said that conditions on the property are unwholesome working conditions. So I want to be very clear that that's what we said.
Are we allowed to question the witness?
Absolutely.
Are you aware that a new DPW will cost approximately $10 million?
I think it would have cost less than that if we dealt with it in 1999. My concern, and I mean this, Mark, I think that when you have a report, it's not just that it's unwholesome. We know that the $50,000 you folks threw at it in 2016 was to keep the thing from falling down on the heads of the DPW workers. It is a very substantially risky place. And if we're going to go through some open-ended process that simply says that we, by naming it as an area in need of redevelopment, then we're recognizing that it doesn't say liability, but how can you not read liability into the words that the planner said? He did not say anything about unwholesomeness. He talked about public safety. He talked about public welfare, all those questions, and he's right about that. Our town hasn't dealt with that facility in an appropriate way. Thank you.
Perfect. Yes, so.
Alan Sohn, S-O-H-N.
Please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth before.
Yes, I do. I attended and participated in December 7th, 2016 workshop meeting that was held at Holy Name Hospital, in which Mr. Price and then Township Manager Broughton discussed the issue of the DPW yard. And the minutes, and again, I'm quoting from these minutes directly, Mr. Price, Township Planner, further discussed the study of the DPW and that no locations in the township were suitable for the relocation of the DPW that evening, and said that he felt specifically that the DPW should be sited there. Fran Wilson, then the superintendent of the Department of Public Works, said he was adamant that, again, that it should not be parceled out in other pieces. Going back to your metaphor, Mr. Bondner, the question of whether we should or should not buy a car, do we not need a new car? There's a previous question, that is, can we afford, can we justify, should we even be looking for a car in the first place? If you look at your bank account, you only have $8 in the bank, you can't buy a car. It doesn't make a difference whether you need it or you don't need it, you can't afford it. Now, it does break your metaphor, but the question is, and I'd like to ask Mr. Price, does he stand behind those statements? Is there any point in pursuing redevelopment or potential redevelopment of the DPW if there is no other site in the township that would be appropriate for relocation of the DPW?
So the study that we did at that particular time, I stand by that. Obviously, one of the alternatives that will be looked at as part of the redevelopment plan, and this is not because I've discussed it with anybody, our focus has been on the area need, but obviously one of the things that we'll look at is rebuilding the DPW in place. I mean, that has to be one of the alternatives that's looked at. So that is one thing.
And Mr. Price?
Can I just?
No, beyond that answer, which I think consistent with covering what that, with then any further discussion, we'll be talking about what we are not talking about, other things, so please.
So, and the only other thing I'll say is, obviously, if the DPW, if something else is redeveloped there, then the DPW will have to be relocated in some other part of Teaneck. That's all I'm saying.
Well, something else will be figured out, but we're not talking about that tonight.
Again, to go further to that December 7, 2016 meeting, Councilman Schwartz spoke about, again, potential use of the DPW yard. And
Mr. Summer, to say one thing, we're talking about if it should be redeveloped or not about future uses. So Just focus on whether it should be redeveloped or declare the area redevelopment or not.
And Mr. Price, quote, Mr. Price responded that the key was to review the engineering and environmental issues as they would affect whether or not they would be used for residential or the DPW yard. And again, the question is, if there is no possibility of redevelopment, why bother doing it? It's a question for Mr. Price, but again, I'll wait here.
He answered the question that it could be declared an area of redevelopment and it could still be the site of the future DPW, so.
The only thing I'll say is that the township committee requested that we do the study. It wasn't something that I recommended.
Anyone else for the public before we close the hearing to the public? Last call, look around, see, okay, one more.
Could I just follow up?
No problem. You don't have to be sworn in again, just state your name for the record so we know who's speaking. Loud and clear.
What was I going to say?
State your name for the record first.
State my name, Chuck Merrow, M-E-R-R-O-W. Is it my understanding that tonight will be decided whether or not they'll be considered for redevelopment?
Tonight, this board will make a decision if we believe this is an area that should be declared an area in need of redevelopment. And if we do decide that, we will make that recommendation to the council.
That will be step one.
That's step one. Then council then will take our recommendation and do with it what it sees fit.
And any correspondence, and how will I be able to reference any of that?
We're going to make a resolution to council.
Gotcha, thank you.
And then council, how they make it, what their step is, they'll next. You're getting a lot of exercise.
Tanya Turner. So I just want to go on record as saying that I am for redevelopment of 1425. I will put aside my, opinions, concerns, issues for a latter date of what that 1425 is utilized for. But I am for the redevelopment of that site. It's dilapidated, there are bottles, cans, it's dirty, it's filthy. You can't walk around it without, cutting yourself because there's a liquor store across from it, which also needs to be addressed. But I'm going to say that I am for the redevelopment and I'll stop it there. So.
And as this mentioned earlier, you'll have the opportunity in future meetings to weigh in on what the future of it will be.
Okay, I trust you.
So follow, and there'll be notices and information accordingly.
All right, thank you.
Last call? Yeah, come on. Just state your name for the record, just one in the record.
L-E-W-I-S. I just have one question. You're saying you decided tonight whether it should be for redevelopment or not. That's the question for tonight.
We're going to make a recommendation to council.
So my question is, if you decide to say it's not for redevelopment, then you're going to leave it as is?
Talk to the council about that.
No. In other words, Mr. Price has written a report. We're either going to say we agree with his report, recommend it, or say we don't think his report is right, we think he's wrong. And then we're not going to make a recommendation to council, and then council will do what it wants. Obviously, the other step is if council agrees with us, let's say we decide it's not an area of redevelopment, and council then agrees with us, then they're going to repair what's there and keep it what it is and fix it up better, or rebuild it as is, and not change it or redevelop it.
You mean as
DPW. Well, let's see what happens.
Well, if she's done speaking, well, the next step is for a motion from the planning board.
No, after close it. Is anybody else in the public? One more.
Hi, Bill Moore, Billorr.
Please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth to the board?
I do, sir. Just a quick question. You folks will make a decision. Will you announce it tonight?
Yeah.
And will we get the details of the decision?
Right. It'll be voted on right in front of you tonight.
And okay.
Everything's happening right before your eyes tonight.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Two of you together. Then you. Oh, he's first because he didn't get to speak yet. All right, 1, 2, 3, those are the last three, that's it, I'm closing it to the public.
Kenneth Jones, Jones.
Let's swear him in, this first one tonight, John.
Please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth.
Yes. I only have one very quick question. Must you make a decision on both properties together? Because it seems like 1600 has a lot of other issues that maybe should be considered separately, whereas 1425 is a little more clear. So must they be together, or can they be dealt with separately?
We can choose to make the decision about one yes and one no. We don't have to make the same decision about both. We're going to decide tonight about both. Doesn't have to be the same decision about both. I'm saving you for the end. You're the big finale. We're going to go out with a bang.
Diane Mateo. So, I'm sorry, just to clarify, so we have three options: rehabilitation, redevelopment, and just to leave it as is?
No, tonight we make a decision about deciding if this is recognition for redevelopment. Okay, that's all we're deciding tonight.
And then, again, just one of the residents said, if you decide no, then it would go to council to decide further.
Well, it's a township property, and council controls what the township does with the property, so.
And then they will, I guess, have a meeting on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Big finale. Before you get up here, only about redevelopment now. Do not talk about any future use, or we'll shut you down. And don't talk about my car.
Thank you, everybody who helped me feel warm and welcome to talk again.
Yes, please come back.
Okay.
Everybody, please come to future meetings. We love a crowd.
Yes. Another thing that I want to say in regards to...
Hold on, just say your name for the record. We have to...
Erica Miller. So another thing that I would like to say and why the retirement home wouldn't be a good idea for 1425.
You're talking about future use. You can't talk about future use.
Oh, I thought that was the idea that they had.
No.
So it's not a retirement home that they're thinking about putting at 1425?
No.
Okay. I thought that's what we were talking about, was the 20.
It is zoned for senior residents,
Okay.
not a retirement
So
home.
I thought
Senior residents.
that it should be.
No.
Okay, great. So, all right, thank you. And I want to say one more thing. The Acme, we lost that Acme. So let's think about that too. How are we going to help our demand and our economy?
Board adjustment, 30.
Okay, the hearing is now closed to the public. I want to thank everybody from the public who came out. We appreciate your input. A round of applause to all of you. Thank you very much for coming. I hope you felt welcome in our meeting, and we'd love to have your input, and please come back again in the future. I hope we made you feel welcome here. Okay, board members, so now we have comments and questions of Mr. Price, comments about it, and then we'll have a vote on it, and then based on that, we'll go further. Mr. Rose going around. Actually, it's on Ms. Belcher.
Okay, certainly. Okay, so, I am totally for development. I have lived in Teaneck for almost 40 years. I can remember as a teenager going to the rec center, the old rec center. So it's hard to watch that building kind of get so dilapidated, and I totally believe that something better can be made of it. Because when you think about planning and you think about highest and best use of a property, you want things that are good for the community, okay? But that being said, I am for development, but I'm for responsible development. I am for comprehensive development. And one of the biggest concerns I have about our town is that we do site development. It's not like we are sitting above this town and viewing what is the highest and best use as it pertains to development. So we have a development going up here, one going up there. We don't sit down, it seems like as a planner, and this is not an indictment on you, Mr. Price, but I think that one of the things that we need to really look at is studies. Because when we have to make decisions, we oftentimes are making those decisions in a vacuum because we don't have information. We need more than just parking and traffic. We need to know what impact does these developments have on schools? What do they have on New Jersey Transit buses, where people, my neighbors say they can't even sit down when they get on a bus in the morning because I can't pull out of my driveway in the morning, for instance, because I have people that park on my street and because they don't have, they want to get close to New Jersey Transit buses. So these are things we need to really look at from a planning perspective. We want comprehensive development. And I just want to end with this. I've spoken with brokers and developers, and I'm just using Hackensack as an example. And I had a discussion recently about the development in Hackensack is like 20 years in the making. And it's like someone has made decisions to look at that city and make decisions comprehensively. And all I'm going to say is that I think we would be best served if we began to think about the planning and involve the communities. I mean, we can see from tonight how important this is to our neighbors. So it's just, I probably will vote for this, but I'm concerned that we need to put a footnote on development. We need to say, yes, I'm for development, but show me data. Show me something that makes us believe that we're getting what we need to get, and it's going to benefit our community.
Thank you.
May I address that? Or shall we wait my turn? Sorry? You mentioned that show what's good for the community. I think we addressed that. What this current zoning is for age-restricted senior housing, which I hope doesn't affect our school districts, because that would be interesting. It's restricted to seniors. But I can't think of it. I can't think of a better use than allowing our seniors to age in place in an affordable housing situation. And frankly speaking, whether it was 25, whether it was 25.
Wait. Have it under control, Alderman. Let's take it easy, please. We respect everybody from the public. Please respect the board members' opportunity to speak.
And whether there's 25 or 40 units, the demand is hundreds of units. We had a forum for affordable housing, and over 250 people showed up for applications. I think that number was low, as more showed up for affordable housing. So there is a dire need for this in town, and I can't think of any better use for our community. As it relates to Hackensack is a redevelopment agency. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware, the township put forward a suggestion of a redevelopment agency about 6 months ago. The same type of redevelopment agency represented by the council. And not dozens, but numerous upon numerous people came out and spoke against that redevelopment agency. So we keep having this conversation. I want development, but I want smart development. I want development, I want smart development. And we never seem to be able to hit that on the head of what it is, because it seems like you're giving us this impossible task. And I can't think of any better social and moral use of this property the township owns than to put our seniors there.
And I would remark with that. I just want to respond to that. If the impact isn't to schools, what is it to hospitals?
That's right. Thank you.
What is it to hospitals, to our parks? So
hold on. Howard, come on. Everybody can't just be screaming out here. I'm asking in public and board members. Everybody wait your turn, and please don't be screaming out.
It'll get a legitimate question. Hackensack is building approximately 2,000 units. What we've built so far is about 600. This particular site is between 25 currently up to 45 that the nonprofit's proposing. So if we want to talk about hospitals, I mean, these hospitals we have plenty of clinics going up. These hospitals have room the hospitals are building. So we can just basically stop everything. Let's just stop New Jersey in its track in the status quo. Let's have people stay in their house, die in their house. And again, I've been to numerous houses where people have passed away. I've actually been on Teaneck Rd where people got hit by cars and passed away. And March 2007 was the last one for me. So there's a lot we have to work through, but to stagnate everything, to say we're not going to do anything, is not how we can age this town and age the state.
And that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, let's get data so that we can
Absolutely.
have informed decisions.
Absolutely, as
We
you
can make
heard.
informed decisions.
And as you heard, that's already been, the plan's already been.
Begun a week ago, yes.
Mr. Schwartz, want to finish out your comments? Anything else? Mr. Rose, while we're on the side already.
Thank you. A long time ago, and on many occasions, I guess, several occasions, I've always expressed the concern that what we're doing is we are spot zoning. And I was told, this is not spot zoning, we're just merely talking about a specific site. What the difference is between that terminology is beyond me. I agree with you 100%, Denise, when you indicate that we need to look at a general situation and see what the impact is, as opposed to what one individual thing is. I am concerned in terms of the report seems to indicate, as Mr. Powers said, that it talks about future use within it, and I wonder if that portion can and should be redacted from the report. And I'll continue after you answer that.
There's a requirement in the statute that says you have to provide an indication of what the zoning is and what the master plan is. That's all that is in the report. There is no recommendation about future use. It's just a citation of where those two properties stand with regard to the zoning and master plan. And it does not mean that that will affect the redevelopment plan, and that there'll be an opportunity to review that and determine whether that should be changed or not. So the report does not comment about future use. All it is reporting what the master plan and zoning has said about that use.
Thank you for clarifying that. I don't see how anyone can look at this, and I'm including now my peers on the planning board. When you look at a situation where you have two properties that are clearly not utilized well, that are inferior, that are even detrimental. So I am very much for redevelopment. What that implies as a secondary step may be opening Pandora's box or providing a panacea for all of our ills and concerns. I don't know, we can go in one direction or the other or somewhere in between, but that's a later stage and something that we have to look at as we develop. Again, it's a long-term situation, and I think this is a first step that is necessary.
Karen?
So first, I want to commend Mr. Price. This is the second time we're hearing this information. We got to hear it at the last meeting, and it's been explained to us very clearly, and I think it was explained to all of you very clearly. He makes it very easy to understand. I also would like to commend the chair. I love that everybody got to speak until they were done speaking tonight, and I hope that the rest of the meetings continue the same way. There's something very nice about sitting up here and hearing everything from everybody, especially if it's positive. And I hope that everybody here continues to come back to the next meetings so that you see that we're getting the information from you and you're seeing where we get the information when we make our decision. I don't think there's anyone in this room that doesn't want what's best for Teaneck developed, for the residents and for the beauty of the town. And I can't think of two spots that are more in need of redevelopment than these two. The one thing that everybody has said over and over again is how awful these two spots are now. And so this is the first step, and it may take a while, and maybe this should have been done in 1990 or 2000, but it's being done now. So I think we should all move forward and leave the past as the past and see what we can do with these for the best of the township.
Vice Chair?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank the public for coming out and asking some very good questions and making some very, very good comments. I just want to confirm with Mr. Price, I'm assuming that your recommendation in that we read in the report still stands. There's nothing you heard tonight that will change that has changed your mind. Am I correct?
You are correct.
Very good. So that being said, I suspect that we will all be seeing each other several more times over the coming months and years. I'm talking about this some more. I think we need to deal with the question at hand, which is the conclusion that Mr. Price made in his report and the recommendation that he made in his report declaring these two parcels as areas in need of redevelopment. I'm not going to make any comment about what should or should not be there. I don't think that's appropriate at this time. So let's just deal with the question in front of us. I'm going to vote in favor of, if there is a motion, in favor of declaring both these parcels areas in need of redevelopment.
Is that a motion? There is one person.
The chairman still hasn't spoken.
That's a motion.
He might change my mind.
I get my bite of the apple. Okay, I want to just read a Karen took the words right out of my mouth. Thank Mr. Price for a wonderful presentation. Very clear, very, like you said, when he started, he would speak shortly because he's very clear, very concise. Both last time and this time, it's quite impressive when it gets to the point that I have both last week and this week no questions. My compliments to you on that. Thank you very much. Again, I thank the members of the public from the bottom of my heart, and I mean that. It means a lot to our board when the public comes out, and we often get a bad rap, and people speak that planning board and the council do things without listening to public, hearing from public, blah, 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 and all that. So I hope that you saw it tonight and you go out and tell people it's not true and that they can come back here at any time. And as was mentioned by the planner last meeting, when it was an informal presentation to this board and the public was here in a capacity of really overviewers, just people in the public listening, and really there was no requirement for them, it was not a public hearing, there was no requirement for the public to have the opportunity to ask questions or to weigh in. I, as I always do, gave the public that opportunity, and I always, at every opportunity that I can, try to give the public, go above and beyond to give the public their opportunity to speak. So to us that's important. We're here, we are residents of Teaneck. We also care about Teaneck. I don't live that far from the DPW. I drive by it all the time, and I could feel for those who live on Teaneck Road how they feel about it, and I'm up there often as well. And both areas need to be cleaned up and changed. Something has to be done. And as was said, we have to look to the future. This is step one to the future. So I am personally in favor of them being recommended as areas of needed development. There's no question that they have to be changed. And like you all said, step one starts here. So I will ask if there's someone here to make the first motion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that the planning board recommend to the council that they designate the two parcels, 1425 Teaneck Rd, I believe, and 1600 River Road, as well. Right, at block 1002, lot 2, and block 5703, lot 11. That we believe that it has met the criteria of NJSA quoted in Mr. Planner's report. 48:12A-5A and 5B. And that we recommend to the council that these two parcels be designated as non-condemnation areas in need of redevelopment. And
it's areas of need of redevelopment. Second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Rose. So motion by Mr. Stern, second by Mr. Rose. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, roll call, Rose.
Mr. Rose?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Schwartz?
Yes.
Vice Chair Stern?
Yes.
Chair Barger?
Yes.
Ms. Morgan?
Yes.
Ms. Belcher?
Yes.
All right, so it's unanimous. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, should we pass a resolution tonight?
I have to.
Do you have the resolution?
No.
Is there a letter of resolution we could read?
I'm going to read it. So, I'm going to read a resolution that we prepared in anticipation of a possible vote in light of the fact that we had this, no changes were made from last meeting's presentation, and all the board members were generally in favor of the last meeting, and Mr. Price had no changes from the original informal presentation to this week's presentation. So we had a resolution prepared by our attorneys. I'm going to read this resolution, and then the board's going to vote on the resolution. A resolution of the Planning Board of the Township of Teaneck recommending that the properties identified Block 1002, Lot 2, Block 5703, Lot 11, or any portion thereof be designated as a non-condemnation redevelopment area in accordance with the local redevelopment housing law NJSA 48:12A 1ETSEQ. Whereas the local redevelopment housing law NJSA 48:12A 1 SQ redevelopment law authorizing municipalities to determine whether certain parcels of land located there constitute areas in need of redevelopment, and whereas the mayor and council of the Township of Teaneck Lake Borough adopted a resolution authorizing and directing the planning board of the borough board to conduct a preliminary investigation to determine whether certain properties identified as Block 1002, Lot 2, Block 5703, Lot 11, or any portion thereof study area meet the criteria set forth in redevelopment law, and should be designated as a non-condemnation redevelopment area as that term is defined by the redevelopment law. And whereas the board conducted a preliminary investigation of the study area to determine whether it should be designated as a non-condemnation redevelopment area in accordance with criteria and procedures set forth in NJSA 48:12A-5 and 48:12A-6, and whereas part of its preliminary investigation, the board caused Richard Price, PP from Phyllis Price, Recyle Center, LLC, the board's consultant planner, to prepare an area in need of redevelopment investigation study, area in need study, for the board, its consideration to determine whether the study area should be designated a non-condemnation redevelopment area. And whereas in addition to the foregoing, Mr. Price prepared a map showing the boundaries of the proposed redevelopment area and location of parcels of property included therein, along with the statement setting forth the basis for its investigation in accordance with NJSA 48:12A-6B1, and whereas a public hearing is conducted by the board on May 14, 2019, notice having been properly given pursuant to NJSA 48:12A-6B3, and whereas at a public hearing the board reviewed the area and needs study, the map and associated documents, and heard testimony from Mr. Price and others, and whereas the public hearing members of the general public were given the opportunity to be heard and to address the question to the board concerning the potential designation of the study areas a non-condemnation redevelopment area, and whereas after completing this investigation, public hearing on the matter, the board concluded that there was sufficient credible evidence to support findings that satisfy the criteria set forth in local redevelopment housing law, particularly in NJSA 48:12A-5, for designating the study area as a non-condemnation redevelopment area, and that said designation is necessary for the effective redevelopment of the area comprising the study area. Now therefore be resolved by the chairman and members of the planning board of the Township of Teaneck, County of Bergen, State of New Jersey, that in accordance with the redevelopment law, the board recommends to the mayor and council that Block 1002, Lot 2, and Block 5703, Lot 11, or any portions thereof as shown on the official tax map of the borough of Teaneck, the Township of Teaneck, be and hereby deemed to be a non-condemnation redevelopment area pursuant to the local redevelopment housing law. NJSA 48:12A-1, and be further resolved that the board hereby reserves all of the authority and powers granted to it under the redevelopment law, and be it further resolved that the board secretary shall forthwith transmit a copy of within resolution to the Commissioner of the Department of Community Affairs for review, and be it further resolved that within 10 days of the Board Secretary shall serve notice of the Board's determination and within resolution upon all record owners of the property within the non-combination redevelopment area, those whose names are listed on the tax assessment records, and upon each person who filed a written objection thereto and stated in or upon written submission and address to which notice of determination and resolution may be sent, and upon commission of the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs. And be it further resolved that this resolution shall take effect immediately. Joseph Bodnar, Chairman, Planning Board. Roll call.
Mr. Rhodes?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Schwartz?
Yes.
Vice Chair Stern?
Yes.
Chair Bodnar?
Yes.
Ms. Organ? Yes. Mr. Belcher?
Yes.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Stern to adjourn, second. Motion by Stern, second. Meeting adjourned. Thank you again, everybody, for coming.